All right. Well, Dr. Tolbert, Dr. Miller, thanks again for your time. Do appreciate it. My name is Matthew Schell. I'm Capsim's Market Development Manager here, where I actually assist a lot of our contributing authors, both in academia and in the corporate sphere, with creating CapsimInbox versions. And as far as an agenda goes today, I figured this call will probably take us about maybe 30 to 45 minutes, I would say. But in terms of what we'll cover, I thought I'd briefly start with an introduction into CapsimInbox, just so you can kind of see the interface. We're going to take a much deeper dive a little later in the presentation, but at least show you a little bit of it up front. Immediately after that, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about us here at Capsim, kind of what brought us to create CapsimInbox, a little bit about our history. And then I'd kind of show you the lead up to why did we create CapsimInbox, the initial version in August of 2017. Why did we build it, and how did we exactly create it? A little bit about our philosophy behind it. And then immediately after that, I'll go into an in-depth platform demonstration. We're going to walk through the entire student experience, basically from the time they log in to the simulation all the way to the feedback report, and I can even show you the instructor side of things on the platform. And then I thought I'd spend a little bit of time talking about, how we directly relate to some of the criteria for the best emerging instructional technology solution. And then finally, with both your background in instructional design, I thought I would share with you some very interesting updates that we're doing in terms of the future of Inbox, not just with new versions, but actually moving this to an authoring platform that we're going to be able to provide essentially as a software as a service. Sound good?
Okay.
Excellent. And then, of course, I want to try to keep this conversational. So if you do have any questions, feel free to stop me. I can also, take some breaks in to see if there's any questions as well. And by chance, if there's any sort of technical style questions that might be more better suited for our product development team, feel free to let me know still. I'd be happy to get those answered. But we'll go ahead and get started.
All right.
Okay. So with an introduction, what exactly is CapsimInbox? So essentially, what we've created with CapsimInbox is a very much self-directed and web-based, simulation-based skill assessment tool, where we're really trying to assess and develop the key skills, whether they be more soft skill related, which we'll focus on a bit during the call, or hard skills, and really try to put the student in a practical kind of experiential role to see how they actually interact with employees at a company, but also interact with different issues and scenarios. Again, entirely web-based. They would simply log on at capsim.com, and they have immediate access. And then to give you a top-level overview, what exactly does the simulation entail? Well, we have a very thorough onboarding process that kind of walks them through, what skills are we assessing, why are they important to their future career success. And then we have a self-assessment component where it's basically asking them relative to their peers, where do they place themselves in terms of soft skills or hard skills. And then after that comes the practical assessment, the actual simulation itself. And I can actually show you a little bit of what this looks like now. Again, we'll revisit this in the platform demonstration, but essentially what we wanted to create was a simulated email environment simulation, a micro simulation, that only takes about 60 minutes to complete. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to put the student in the role of a manager at a company and see what would they do if they were in the driver's seat. How would you handle, common everyday situations, or how would you handle even issues and crises that can come up at any given moment? And a good way to think about CapsimInbox from like a 30,000-foot level is think of it as kind of like a digital choose-your-own-adventure, because we have a lot of functionality with the platform that really much mimics how email correspondence would go. We can have threaded responses where, based on the response you choose, it may lead you down a more positive or negative path. Some responses may be more effective than others. That could leave student A and student B in completely different end scenarios. And they're always going to be constantly, seeing the consequences of their previous decisions and acting on them all within this 60-minute experience. And then after they complete the 60-minute assessment, what we're able to do is we're able to provide detailed individual feedback report instantaneously after they complete it. And we can actually show them their overall performance in the assessment in relation to all other CapsimInbox users that have gone through that particular version. And then we also are able to visualize and add some empirical data around their self-awareness levels as well as their skill gaps. And again, of course, we'll revisit these a little bit later, but just want to give you an idea of what we'll be looking at today. Now, in terms of us here at Capsim, a little bit about our history. So we're based here in the city of Chicago. We're a smaller company, only about 50 or so employees, And we've actually been around for quite a while. We've been around since the mid-1980s, and actually our whole start in the simulation industry was around creating, custom simulations directly for corporate clients. However, I would say over the last 20, 25 years or so, we've really put our focus more on academia. We have pretty much a wide variety of different sims, some that are more self-directed on soft skill development like Inbox, but some of our more long-standing simulations are more project-based, group-based learning, with some of our simulations including Capstone and Foundation. And typically these are seen in like strategic management style programs. But what we wanted to do with Inbox was basically be able to create micro-simulation solutions for every facet of the standard undergrad and graduate level business curriculum. And at any given time, we're in about 1,100 universities around the globe, and we provide full support services to about 3,000 professors and about 140,000 students at any given point in time. And all of that's done with our network of client relationship consultants right here in office in Chicago. Now, outside of academia, we still do stay true to our corporate beginnings. We very commonly do professional development trainings, whether they be 1 to 3 day on-site trainings, focusing on things like, identifying high potential employees for succession management, or say, for instance, for, trying to show the effectiveness of cross-functional decision-making, trying to reduce silos within an organization. These are very common learning objectives of some of our programs. And in fact, we're just now starting to see CapsimInbox utilized in the corporate market as kind of a quick and easy way to kind of get a touch point on the skills of employees, where from an admin level, say for like a learning and development or a training and development manager level, they can kind of sit back and watch the results come in and have different scenarios that could be more applicable for, say, lower level management or supervisory management and so on. But the good thing about the corporate aspect here is it ties very well into, why and how did we decide to build CapsimInbox. But I figured I'd just take a brief moment to stop here. Is there any questions you had about our history or any of our other solutions?
No, I'm good.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about why and how did we build CapsimInbox. And, kind of relating back to our corporate clients, when we're doing these types of trainings, it's very, we're always trying to keep our ear to the ground as to, what sort of skills, what sort of competencies do you wish you had in, existing employees, or that you're actively looking for in, new employees that you're trying to scout. And what we heard was the same feedback over and over at the time. And we're talking around the summer of 2017 at this point. And what we heard was the same thing: soft skills, soft skills, soft skills, particularly around problem solving, communicative and teamwork capabilities. So what we did was we started to take a deeper dive into what's the research behind it say. Is this just kind of a corporate issue, or is this something that's also prevalent in academia as well? So at the time, the Bloomberg Job Skills Report of 2016 had just come out. And what they did was they asked about 1,200 recruiters from about 550 different companies, if you were looking for the most desired yet least common skills out of new applicants, what would they be? And what they did was they said that the main three they were looking for was the ability to lead, problem solve, and as well as communicate. So kind of aligning with what we heard from our own clients. But then we also wanted to take a look at academia. So we looked at the GMAC, the Graduate Management Admission Council. They had recently done a survey of about 61 different MBA alumni. This is right after they graduate, and they asked them, if there is any particular area that you wish you could have more development on. And actually 85% of those MBAs said that they had a need for more management education. And if they were going to focus on any particular area, it was going to be specifically around managing human capital. So again, relating back to those soft skills like leadership and teamwork, for example. So we looked at these two initially, and after that, we wanted to look at a couple more. So we looked at, LinkedIn does these great, workforce reports every year. They just came out with 2019's. That had some interesting insights into it, particularly around the need for, companies to try to figure out how do they identify skill gaps. But we also looked at things like the National Association of College Employers as well. And out of all these different studies, the same 5 attributes kept coming up. Again, these leadership, teamwork, initiative qualities, these sort of things. And we're finding that a lot of the time, the lack of such capabilities can lead to some barriers to long-term success, whether they be, the inability to work in that team, or if you're not meeting your business objectives, or are you able to, develop and adapt to new situations commonly. So these are some major things we wanted to address when we created CapsimInbox. And then from a general kind of developmental, philosophy standpoint, what we really try to boil it down is like, what are the key, elements, what are the key criteria that you really need to promote meaningful development in a tool? And what we did is we worked with some industrial organizational psychologists as well as some professors from DePaul University here in Chicago, and we really boiled it down to these 4 key factors. The main thing we wanted to do was make sure we had an assessment that would assess both knowing and doing. So trying to bridge that gap between theory and practice by making sure that we're assessing skills through the practical application of knowledge. So again, trying to put them into that real world scenario. The second thing that we wanted to do was that we wanted to kind of have a tool that would foster accurate self-awareness, and not through self-reporting, but actually giving them some objective information. So while they do self-report with the assessment, we're comparing that to the general population that has gone through Inbox to be able to show that disparity between what they know and what they think they know. Because, it's, can be common that, we as humans can sometimes overestimate our abilities, of course. And then the third thing was that we wanted to make sure that we delivered an engaging and a relevant experience. So high fidelity was key. I definitely wanted to take an experiential approach, but we wanted to make sure that it was career related. And in our eyes, what better way of having it than a simulated email platform, as many of the careers out there, if not the majority, have some sort of email correspondence taking place. And then finally is that we really wanted to make sure we could provide actionable feedback, specific developmental tactics that we could provide, so that not only are we just giving them like, here's where your skills are at, but actually giving them the tools and resources to improve themselves going forward and have the ability to assess their progress all along the way. Because one thing we'll talk about as we go through this is the ability to pre and post test with Inbox, where an individual could take this, say, as early as high school, and we do see this actually used at high school level quite a bit, particularly with student organizations like Future Business Leaders of America. And then they could take it again in their undergrad, again in their graduate program, and then again as they're starting their career as many times as they'd like, and they'd be able to see the net change, the net improvement of those skills all the way back to that first time they went through Inbox, essentially. Any questions so far?
No, I'm good.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and I can take you through a walkthrough of the student experience. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop out of this presentation deck real quick. And what we created was via hyperlink, kind of a guided tour that'll walk you through the entire SIM experience. I'll, of course, provide this to you, and then I can provide a regular student demo account. That way you can see the entire process there. But first and foremost here, what we're looking at is the student dashboard. So students go to capsim.com, they log in, they're brought here. And from here, they're going to be able to see any previous inboxes that they've done, as well as their performance by percentile in those. And then, of course, like I was mentioning earlier, their net change that they'll be able to see. But we'll come back to this in a little bit. So let's kind of walk through what's Inbox look like from their eyes. So let's go ahead and click Take Assessment. So again, we really wanted to put an emphasis on it being very self-directed. We wanted to try to make as little administrative burden as possible. That way, we can make it as simple as really providing a hyperlink for students to register directly into Inbox that could be added right into a syllabi, or provided via email. We could go about it either way. But the first component of the onboarding is going to be they see an introductory video. And essentially the video is going to tell them, what is CapsimInbox? What skills are we going to be assessing in this particular version? And why are they particularly relevant to both an academic and a corporate atmosphere, essentially? And then after they see that initial video, that's where we bring them to the self-assessment here. And again, we ask them the question, relative to your peers, where do you place yourself on the following skills? Now, the particular version we're looking at is our general management CapsimInbox. This was the first iteration we created, and is going to focus on those core soft skills we were talking about in the research. But basically, they're going to self-report and say, okay, I think that maybe I'm about average in my leadership capabilities. I'm about, even with the population. Definitely got some work to do in my organization for sure. But I think I'm really good at initiating solutions and kind of driving those solutions. And then, of course, we'll end up comparing this with the simulation results a little later on. The next thing that we do is we try to set the scene. So depending on the version, the student's going to take several different roles at different types of companies, depending on the subject area. But the general framework is that they're going to be like a mid-level manager at a company. And what we do is we talk to them about how long they've been there, who reports to them, who is their direct report, and then, what kind of experience you have with the company's products, essentially. So just very top-level information. And then down here, we provide a company one-pager. talks about the firm they're working at. We provide mission and vision statements, the products and services that they provide, or the clients that you'll be interacting with. But again, really, it's more about just more so setting the scene. It's not as if the students have to do like a deep dive into this company or like know a lot about the industry. It's just making sure that the story is set up the right way, and we're going to have those interactions with employees take place in the actual simulation itself. The next thing that we do is we have a brief technical tutorial, just kind of shows them how do you actually choose responses within the exercise. And then they get to the final page here where they have this enter green inbox button. So this would complete the onboarding. Typically, I would say this takes about 10 minutes to complete tops, just a quick chance to review the company you're working for and do your self-assessment. But this can be completed in any sort of time frame. What really is contingent is that once you click that green button, you're going to go into the timed simulation experience. But any questions about the onboarding? Pretty straightforward?
I'm good.
Cool. All right. So let's go ahead and hop in. So now here we are back to that original slide we were looking at here. And as you both probably know, or as you can both probably see, we really try to frame this off of, Outlook, Gmail, the things that we're using every day. So just a quick look around the user interface. We want to make it nice and user-friendly, colorful and whatnot. We have the timer at the top that the student can actually hide if they'd like to. And this is something that's editable depending on the version. We have some that are as short as 30 minutes. Our average would be 60 minutes, and we have some that span a little bit longer than that. But looking to the left there, you're going to see that you have your inbox full of files. And over the course of an hour, they're going to respond to about 20 to 30 emails, I would say. They can check sent items to see their previous responses, and they can archive some emails if they want to look at them later. Underneath that, we have a company drive, which is just like the cloud-based services we use, like OneDrive, for instance. And here we can put in virtually any type of media you can think of, whether they be Microsoft Office files, an organizational chart like you're seeing here now, or, of course, we always include that company one-pager that they saw in the onboarding. That way, if they need to reference back to it, they have that information. But really, with the organizational chart here, we want to, of course, demonstrate, where are you exactly at in the company? And in general management, you're the Director of Sales and Operations for the Midwest region of Ubiquitools. This is a kind of an Internet of Things style company like Google, essentially. And I'll also show you who you're talking to in relation in the company. For instance, you may want to answer an email from Kim Cameron, Chief Executive Officer, before answering, say, one of the other directors from a different region. And it brings us to a good point about some of the technical functionality we have here, where say you responded to the CEO's email first. Well, that's taking initiative. We actually have priority bonuses we can assign to these, or time bonuses if you can respond to a certain amount of emails within that time. And this is all created, by the author as they're developing that version. You'll see, of course, your list here of the different contacts you'll be interacting with, everybody from clients, supervisors, subordinates, contractors, you name it. And then, of course, here on the right, you're going to see the actual emails you have to answer themselves. Now, you'll notice down here, of course, we do have multiple choice responses. And what's the logic behind that? Well, what we wanted to do was we wanted to be able to basically show a variety of nuanced responses on a scale of least effective to most effective, but also having ones that have, kind of more neutral, don't really move the ball forward, or even detrimental. So to give you an idea, we may have 5 responses. Maybe the response A is the by far best response, the most effective one. The second one's kind of okay. Maybe the first one was worth 10 points. This one's worth 5 points towards problem solving, for example. Maybe the third response is neutral. You're not really, doing anything for the conversation. We put that at 0. Or maybe you're making a kind of an off-base decision that would kind of move the conversation in the wrong direction. We can even attribute negative values to that. And we have different scoring models that we provide to our authors. That way they can create a scoring template that works best for their particular version. Now, in addition to the actual email responses, we also have instant messages. And the main reason we did this is we wanted to kind of break up the monotony of it just being emails, have a different type of stimuli come in. Typically, these are shorter responses. And this is actually a good example here that I can show you. Within the general manager version, as the Director of Sales and Operations, you have Harold Fitz out in the field. He's got a new client that's going to purchase 405 units of one of your products. And he's pretty sure that they get a 15% discount on that order. And you could say, that's great. You go ahead and move forward with the order at that time. But if you were to check the drive file and you looked at the different sales promotions you have going on to make a well-informed decision, you'd find that actually they're entitled to a greater discount. So just kind of giving an example of the critical thinking that goes on throughout this. Now, what happens after they complete the entire assessment? They responded to all the emails. Well, what's going to happen is they're immediately going to be prompted to say the inbox experience has been completed. Let's go take a look at your feedback report. And the great thing is about this is that the feedback report's instantaneous. They're going to be able to see it immediately after they complete the assessment, or the professor can set a later date and time for them to have access to it. Most common example would be we want to make sure that everybody goes through it before everybody's results are shown, that sort of thing. But what are we exactly covering in this feedback report? Well, like I mentioned towards the beginning of the call, the main thing we show them here at the top is their overall performance by percentile against the entire population of CapsimInbox users for that version, so only measured against general management in this case. And we do keep that open to everybody, so high schoolers all the way through higher education into the corporate sphere. We keep all of that in the same pool because we want them to be able to grow with this simulation and be able to see how they've improved within that percentile over the course of their academic and corporate career. Below that, we have a quick little developmental index here. And what we're trying to show here is how proficient was the student's response to the emails, and then how consistent were they in that proficiency. So maybe you chose often the correct response, but maybe it just wasn't as consistent as it could have been. Maybe there were some priority issues, for example. So they'll be able to see that there. And then below that is probably the more interesting aspect of this, is where we start to actually compare that self-assessment with the inbox assessment. And what we do is we have a self-awareness gauge on a scale of 0 to 6. We'll show them just how well they know their own skills. So it's kind of a good check to that overconfidence. We want to make sure that you're not overestimating your abilities any more than you're underestimating your abilities as well, because it can work both ways, of course. And then below that, and perhaps the most intriguing part about it, is that we're actually visualizing the skill gaps. So we're showing the self-assessment via the inbox assessment, and the primary reason we want to do this is that way we can help the student identify which areas are in most need for improvement at that given point in time. Okay? Any questions about the simulation experience or the feedback report here?
No, that's great.
Excellent. Thank you. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next step here, because you get all this feedback and everything, but how do you exactly utilize it? Well, what we did was we made an optional component to this, and it varies between the versions. Some authors like it, some don't. Some it may not be the best fit. But most of our versions have this individual development plan builder. So immediately the student, after they review their feedback, is going to see a video from the author. Here was my intention for this simulation. Here's what I want you to take away from it. And then down here, under each of the skill categories, we actually have developmental tactics provided by the author as action items for them to improve those skills. And this could be everything from tips and tricks to how to improve it in both academia or in the corporate sphere. It could include something like suggested readings, very commonly discussion topics for in-class discussion, or even essay questions, things to consider, or just general steps to move the ball in the right direction. And we're also showing here the scores for each of those skills, as well as the level of developmental need. So in this case, organizing would be something we really want to improve upon. And they can actually save these developmental tactics, save these IDPs and reference them later and check their progress as to how do they improve going forward. So let me go ahead and show you how we can actually create a goal. So what we do is we have the students select the skill that they want to develop. In this case, recognizing issues. The very first thing we ask them is we want them to reflect a little bit. So describe 2 or 3 reasons why this skill is important to your current or future career success. And, this is just a template, of course. Usually these are a little bit more filled out, of course. But we also ask them, where you might use or practice the skill, in this case in the workplace, of course. Now, after that, they set their goal statement. So in this case, this individual wants to increase their proficiency in improving recognizing issue skills by 5% no later than this date, and they're choosing to evaluate themselves by going through CapsimInbox again, so referencing again that pre- and post-test aspect. But we also have models for self-evaluation, peer evaluation, as well as managerial or professor evaluation too. But I would say by far, 9 times out of 10, most commonly in an academic sphere, they are usually using this in a pre-test, post-test application. Very often for assurance of learning or accreditation purposes, whether they be within a course to see if they met their learning objectives, or of the effectiveness of an individual coming into a school's program and when they're leaving the program, essentially. And then below that, they're able to create the plan. So this is where they're actually making those tangible steps to move forward with that improvement. So they're notifying what they're going to do, what day they're going to do it, and what resources do they need to enable to achieve that goal, essentially. And this kind of wraps up everything with the student experience. So they create this IDP. It could be 3 weeks later. It could be 3 months, 3 years later. They go through Inbox again. We have parallel versions. That way, if you wanted to have the same skills assessed but a different story, we can do that. Or you can have them go through the exact same version, because what we're finding is that after about 3 weeks, the students very rarely remember most of the scenario. And an added benefit is at no point are we ever giving the students the most effective responses to the emails. So there's really no way to game the game, essentially, because we're not giving that kind of information. We're just kind of showing them as a practical application and then giving them the tools to move forward and improve that. But let's go ahead and take a look at the instructor dashboard. So on the instructor side of things, very straightforward, not too dissimilar from the student side of things. The first thing you're going to be able to see is the overall class cohort average in relation to the overall group sample that we have. And then to the right of that, you're going to be able to see the average scores for each of the skills being assessed. And then below that, you could see kind of a brief course roster. It says the student's name, their overall score, self-awareness score, when did they complete the inbox, how long did it take them to complete it, and if and when did they create an IDP, which is something that the instructor can actually view. And in fact, it's very common that we see that professors at the higher education level utilize the IDPs as their form of assessment of the student. How much time and effort did you put into actually improving yourself, as opposed to relying solely on the empirical scoring of the assessment. And to get a little bit more granular than that, we can also show, the individual student scores for each of the skills assessed as well. And what's great about this is that, if you're trying to collect the data and everything like that, you can just generate a CSV file directly from the platform to view in Excel, essentially. Any questions here on the instructor side of things?
No, that's great.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and pop back into the presentation deck we were in here. And as I said at the beginning of the call, happy to give you access directly to general management. However, I have a couple more. If a particular topic interests you, I'd be happy to give you access to that as well. And like I said, on average, these only take about 30 to 45 minutes to complete, so it's completely up to you if you'd like to try it or not. But because of this platform that we created with Inbox, starting with general management, we were able to create several in-house as well as authored version with professors across the country. In fact, not soon after we did general management, we created people management. That's that kind of supervisory role one. My personal favorite is actually ethical decision-making, and the reason I like this one is because you're a manager at a boutique hotel, and you're dealing with all sorts of gray area issues where you don't have all the facts, and there's really no clear answer. It's all about what would you do in that particular scenario. And in fact, the most recent one we did in-house was one around time management, where you're a graphic designer dealing with all sorts of clients, and it's all about how well can you be aware of your schedule, your preparedness, and how well can you ward off procrastination. And in fact, we actually were just highlighted in an article in Harvard Business Review. I'll include this deck in the email, of course, but I've included a link to it at the bottom here where we're referenced within that article as well.
That's great.
Yeah, and then from there, we worked with a lot of authors around the country to create, more subject-specific versions. So for strategic marketing, for example, you're at a Patagonia-style company, and you're determining not just market analysis and product launches, but you're approached by Amazon that they want you to be sort of a non-branded vendor of shoes. Well, do you want to go for the high volume sales of being a vendor through Amazon, or would you try to make your own brand awareness? We also have ones like human resources where you're in the aeronautics industry. It was developed by a director of HR from Boeing, actually. Business law, very much like a live case study. And in fact, one that we created here in-house was a digitalized escape room around a product launch. So, of course, you can imagine how the timer works in that scenario, but we incorporated puzzles within the inbox scenario. That way you could essentially facilitate an escape room, through distant learning, essentially. And then we just released a whole bunch of new versions at the beginning of this year around cultural awareness, operations management, crisis management. So as you can see, really trying to fill all of the facets of that biz curriculum, but also trying to expand into non-business specific areas, say like sports management or healthcare, where it's more indirect. But really we're trying to open up this tool because the applications are, very much endless for this. Now, how is this actually used in the classroom? I've mentioned a couple of these already, but just to kind of reinforce it, this can be used in every way from, a quick in-class exercise, a flipped classroom setting, maybe they do it outside and then you kind of come back to class to discuss it. Very commonly used as a case study, to try to increase that participant engagement, make the case come alive, and, have a group discussion immediately after, and all while, keeping the scenario relevant directly to the course. And then again, I would say probably the most prevalent use would be around the pre and post-test aspect for assessment purposes. So actually capturing the proficiency levels and seeing how they've improved over time. And in addition to, actually being course embedded, we've used this in quite a few different ways. We've used this, again, like I said, in, student organizations like FBLA, DECA, and Business Professionals of America. We see this used in the CTE sphere, for skill assessment or, kind of giving them a taste of what a career could look like. And then, as I mentioned towards the beginning of the call, we still see this utilized in corporate trainings as a little bit more of a hands-off approach to see, where are the skills of all of your managers, which ones may be applicable for, some, be able to work their way up the chain within the organization, essentially. Now what we could do is we could talk about a little bit of how we relate to some of the key criteria for the best emerging instructional technology solution category. And starting off directly with impact. How does this impact the teaching and learning process? Well, really what we wanted to do, again, this kind of goes back to the 4 pillars we talked about earlier, the 4 key criteria, in that we just really want to be able to assess knowing and doing in a very practical and experiential way, but also being able to foster that accurate self-awareness to give students a good grip on where their skills are at any given point in time in their career. And then providing that actionable feedback right up front to students in a way that's, not commonly done, outside of, say, like an ILLiad assessment, for example, which is a much more elongated process of being able to do that. This can be done in just such a short period of time. Now, in regards to innovation, again, kind of referencing that bridging the gap between theory and practice, but doing it in a way that is not very commonly seen through the use of live case studies, in a way that's a little bit more engaging and a little bit more fun than your traditional pen and paper case studies that were commonly done. And I think the big thing when it comes to innovation is really adding that real-world context to learning. And specifically, in higher education, outside of, say, like a co-op class or a practicum or an internship, it can be kind of hard to get that level of fidelity and that level of experience to what you'd see on the job. Obviously, the real thing will always be the best, but we tried to bridge that gap the best we can with Inbox here. And again, the innovation being, too, in regards to relating to other assessments like the ILLiad, for example, giving that feedback as quick and as objective as possible to show the practical application of those concepts. Talking a little bit about disruption, I think that the biggest thing that Inbox can do to kind of disrupt the educational market is in terms of its scalability. And there's kind of multifaceted here. We're talking about not just the implementation with students of how easily students can complete the assessment and the results can come into the administrator, but also from a platform perspective, being able to use this platform to create a variety of different tools for everything outside of the College of Business as well, because there's always some sort of, email is such a common component that the applications are very much endless. And then also the flexibility. So talking a little bit about flexibility here, I'm kind of talking about the intuitiveness of the design, and that we really wanted to design this product so it wouldn't be just made for the instructional designers that may be used to using things like Storyline or Articulate 360, but somebody who's never had previous experience authoring a simulation or authoring at all. And in fact, a good test of this was over the course of 2019. All of those different versions I showed you, we had worked with about a dozen professors across the country. Some had textbook publishing experience, but the majority did not. And we were able to walk them through this process incredibly fast. In fact, some of these versions were created in as little as a month. But I would say the average time to create one, including all testing, which we handle internally, we actually put this out to subject matter experts as well as do student pilots to build that sample group for validity purposes. We handle all of that, and it can be done in, on average, I'd say about 3 to 4 months would be a good estimate. And then again, regarding the endless applications, breaking away from just a quick 60-minute experience, we've added certain functionality that can make this more modular. So to give you an example, we've got some textbook authors that want to create mini modules, say 10 to 15-minute simulations that correspond with the modules of a textbook. That way, the assigned reading is, of course, still there, but then you go right into a practical application of skills to see just how well you retain that knowledge. And to give you a little bit of an insight into the corporate sphere, we're seeing this used for human resource purposes as a part of onboarding training. In fact, we're currently working with some organizations right now as a way to train independent contractors who open their own offices. We're working with one of the insurance companies out there in order to do this. So basically, how do you run a field office from that purview? But really, we're finding new applications day in and day out with this. Usability, pretty quick here. We've hit on these several times throughout it, but really it comes down to that self-directed nature of the assessment through the onboarding, the simulation, and the feedback report. The fact that it's web-based makes it very easy to integrate into a curriculum. There's no downloads or anything like that. And again, the timeliness of it. Being able to do this assessment where, yes, we give you an hour, but average time being about 30 to 45 minutes. Moving on to the relevance, what actually, how is it relevant? How is it needed in the education market? Well, really trying to connect the performance in the assessment with real career skill success. And this is something I'll come back to a little bit later because we've actually done some research since we released CapsimInbox that kind of shows some cool correlations. But also relevant, putting the ownership on the student in terms of self-development. Giving them a practical example of what they can experience is a great motivator for them to want to improve those skills. And it increases student engagement because, we're giving them this, familiar interface, but it's gamified to an extent where they have a fun time doing it, but it's not too gamified where it breaks that level of fidelity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I found in my research during my dissertation.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can go too far on the gamification part, and then, they lose the focus on the content that you want them to learn. So.
Yeah, it's quite a balancing act. I would definitely say that. To what level you want to go that far.
Mm-hmm.
But talking a little bit of the simplicity, does the product have too many or too little features to make it usable or innovative? Well, again, leaning back onto the email interface, it's familiar. Everybody's familiar with the functionality, generally speaking, of course, familiar with the functionality of email, which makes making that bridge into a high fidelity experience fairly easily. It's easy to get lost in the inbox experience. And in terms of the feature updates that we do, because we're always adding features of an inbox, most of the time people are familiar with it. So this could be full text authoring capabilities. So I'll give you a great example of this. Say you've made a couple of multiple choice decisions and navigated a problem in the version of inbox, and you get to this end email from your supervisor saying, I understand you did X, Y, Z for this problem. I want to understand your rationale. Could you explain to me your thought process? We can actually have students write written responses at the close of a case that can be assessed by TAs or by the professor themselves to see, what was their thought process, what was their justification for making those decisions. And they can add a separate score to the student, a performance score to that, completely separate from the empirical assessment that we provide automatically, essentially. And to give you some other insight into features, we added the modular functionality to kind of make checkpoints. That way, if you don't want a single experience, you could break it up. We added smart threading, so that way if a student gets an incorrect response, it'll loop them back and it'll remove the incorrect response. We've got this sort of chaining of emails. That way you can have paths that diverge and come back together or diverge and go off in completely different directions. I mean, there's quite a bit of functionality that we've added already based on a lot of our authors' feedback as well as internal feedback, but we're always increasing these features as they go on. The last 2 points, efficacy, really quick here. I kind of walked you through a little bit of the research-based approach we did in terms of investigating the need for something like Inbox, as well as our general philosophy behind it. But really the main thing here is we're providing reliable empirical data on soft skills that have, for the most part, been traditionally hard to measure. So that's one of the main things. But I referenced earlier a little bit about trying to connect this to career skill success. So what we did with the same group of industrial organizational psychologists and DePaul professors was we did an analysis of some MBA students that are already actively in their careers. And what we did was we had them go through 3 of our versions of CapsimInbox. That'd be the general management, people management, and ethical decision-making versions. And then we correlated their results in Inbox with their actual on-the-job performance provided by their supervisors. And what we found is that we saw a very high correlation both in the content and criterion-related validity that makes it a pretty good predictor of on-the-job success. But I'll be able to provide that document to you if you want to read up on that. It'll be much more in depth, but just kind of give you a general idea of some of the research we've already done on the platform.
Okay.
And then finally, just in terms of accessibility, this is actually a perfect time we're talking with you because we're just now wrapping up the process of getting a CapsimInbox, the entire platform, ADA compliant. So within about a month and a half or so, we'll be fully WCAG 2.0 Class A third-party verified for those compliancy concerns.
Oh, good.
Yep. Now, we're coming towards the end of the presentation. And again, I said, I was looking at a little bit of your backgrounds in instructional design. What I wanted to do is kind of give you a little bit of an insight into the future of CapsimInbox. What future versions are we currently working on, and then to actually show you what we're going to be able to do as a software as a service with Inbox that we're planning to release by the end of the spring semester here. So over the course of 2020, we're going nonstop with new versions here. We're going to be covering the final facets of the business curriculum with things like strategic management and finance management, rounding out some areas when it comes to economic topics, but then we're really going to start breaking out into new areas, things like event management, social media marketing, data analytics, these sort of areas. We're even kind of going to do, bringing it back to business, one around sales, return-driven strategy, business communications, and a more general version that encompasses a lot of your common business competencies as well. So the sky's kind of the limit at this point.
That's great.
But in terms of, maybe there's a version here, very commonly what happens is maybe we give, a professor access to one of these. Maybe it's not the best fit for them. Maybe it doesn't fit their curriculum in the best way possible. Well, we actually have two ways of being able to create those custom solutions for them. And that's what I'll be able to show you here now. Because the first way that we've done, the majority of 2019, was we were working directly with the authors themselves collaboratively, doing bi-weekly review calls where they submit content to us. We upload it into the platform, we review it for them, and then we put it out to testing and then eventually release. And in terms of what actual content do they have to create, well, just to kind of encompass everything we just looked at, and you're looking at the scenario, you're looking at the skills assessed, is it soft skills, hard skills, or a hybrid of the two. You've got the email content themselves. And then, of course, the developmental tactics and any additional resources that the author wants to provide the professor, the end user, just to kind of help them convey the results to their students. And that's where I was saying that, typically this can be like a 3 to 4 month process on average. Because, to give you an idea in terms of how much Inbox has grown, in August 2017, we had one version. By the end of last year, by the end of 2018, we had 5 versions. And now here by the end of 2019, we had 15 versions. So we're looking to continually improve. And what's great, too, is that, it's not like they're starting from scratch either. We can provide them templates for all of the above content. So we've got scenarios already built up for, say, the healthcare industry, product and service industries, manufacturing, finance, you name it. We can pretty much have a template for them to kind of get the ball rolling and to kind of give them some inspiration, essentially. And then the very final topic I wanted to share with you both was to give you that peek at the Inbox authoring platform. So what we wanted to do here is, for both in academia and in the corporate sphere, is provide instructional designers with a tool where they can essentially, take Capsim a little bit out of the process and give the tools directly to them. And really our main source of inspiration is not too far off from the very presentation that we're going through now. Being able to have this presenter view versus an editing view. So essentially what you're going to be able to do here is create your own inbox from scratch using templates or whatnot. You can just simply add your emails, messages, or group text that you have. You'll have an outline view over here that essentially, think of it like mind mapping, having a visual representation of how all the emails relate to each other in a virtual space. We have all of the characters of the simulations in your address book, if you will. So that way you can essentially just pick from a drop-down list of who's this email coming from. And then, of course, you've got the Drive file where you can add any supplemental information. And at any point, you can click that preview experience button and jump directly into seeing what the student would see at that point in time.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And then just to show you some final functionality here to kind of show you how would they fill out this inbox here. So this one, we did a demo for business laws version. So what we're looking at is a chain of emails related to a discrimination claim at a manufacturing plant. Now we've got Taylor Burtnick, the Assistant Director of Human Resources. We went ahead and entered our subject line title. We clicked that it's from her. We can add any attachments directly to the email if we'd like. And then we're able to, of course, add the email body and any individual responses we want to add. Now, how does it work with scoring and in terms of the flow of the simulation? You'll see over here in the control panel that you'll select the response in question. You could say, is it triggered by another email? Maybe you have to answer a separate email from Taylor first to get this particular one. Or maybe you want to make it so that email only comes in maybe 20 seconds or 5 minutes into the simulation. You can do that. And then below that, in regards to scoring, you can assign to that response the skill that it's assessing, the skill being measured, and then a positive or negative value that will be attributed to that skill. And then probably the most commonly requested aspect we had of Inbox was, is there a way that if a student picks an incorrect response that I can immediately give them some feedback? And now we're able to do that with that bottom section there. So say they click that incorrect response, they're going to get a pop-up that will actually show them, well, maybe you needed to consider this aspect here moving forward. So that way they're getting even quicker feedback during the process. Okay?
Very good.
Yeah. So that's about everything. That kind of is a quick synopsis of the CapsimInbox platform. Like I said, I'll be able to give you the access and everything like that. We also have a resource page that we provided with the submission of the nominations that includes the technical synopsis document. I'll eventually upload the video there as well that we're recording right now, and then some additional resources there too. But at this point, I'd be happy to open up to any questions that either of you have, or any general feedback you have on the assessment.
Well, I'm super impressed. I did have a question about that last part that you showed us. So essentially, that's a template.
This one, yeah, this one's a template, yes.
Is that available to anybody that purchases the product that they would be able to customize themselves?
Absolutely. So what we're doing in terms of the model that we're going to go with for this is that we'll have basically two routes you can go. We're going to have the off-the-shelf options that, of course, are already available. Typically, those range about $10 to $30 per student. And then in terms of the software as a service, the platform, authoring platform you're looking at here, what we're currently mulling is sort of a subscription-based model for access and a small end-user fee. That would be all. But what the best part about this is that, you know, since we're providing the tool to you, the intellectual property will actually lie with the author. So they would get, we kind of do these as like a revenue share model, essentially, where the majority of it goes directly to the authors, and then Capsim has a small part of that goes towards, servicing the platform, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, just in terms of timeline, we're trying to make sure that this is fully developed and ready to go by the end of May, because we want to make sure that this is available for any authors during the summer if they want to utilize it, where they could turn around a solution as quickly as maybe fall 2020 semester, essentially.
Right.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Interesting product.
Yeah.
Got a lot of capability.
Well, let me ask
where it would work very well in a lot of different business environments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, we're finding new applications for this every day. We're working on one right now with a major university here in Chicago. I might have mentioned it around public health. Completely different, field that we've never really encompassed before, but everything is just as applicable, so.
Yeah, I like the idea of being able to use the case study, especially, you want to do a Socratic seminar or, have even just an online discussion about a particular module.
Exactly.
They're definitely thought-provoking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially being able to do the independent plan after the self-assessment. It's really great. Really comprehensive product. I'm really impressed.
Well, thank you. We do appreciate that.
Analysis of the audience that the course is going to be for?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time? I missed the beginning.
How much analysis do you do of the learners for this training?
How much analysis of the learners? Well, if we're looking at it like in terms of actually developing a custom solution, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we're usually going to be in direct connection with the IDs, the instructional designers, to see what are the main learning objectives, what are the core competencies they want to assess. That's our main starting point, kind of figuring out what do we really want to achieve here. And then from there, we build the cases around situations that are directly applicable to either the firm or the college that we're building it for. And in terms of assessing, actually garnering those examples, I could give you a good example of that. For this public health one we're talking about, one thing we did was, the authors just asked their colleagues, hey, can you send me 2 or 3 emails that have ever encompassed this style of issue? And then they send them back to them. They don't need to be polished or anything like that, but then the author can go ahead and do that polishing and then add it directly in the assessment, so they are those real-world examples. And most of these, if not the vast majority of these, are all direct examples directly from the author's experience. So.
Okay. I'm just wondering because at one point I taught nurses, and they think differently.
Yeah. I got you.
You've got engineer brains, you've got your medical brains, and they have slightly different ways that you approach them. So I was just wondering how much communication you had with your various customers in terms of, tweaking it really to the audience.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, to expand on that a little bit more, that's really where the subject matter experts come in, because we're really relying on them. Is this valid? Does this make sense? Is this, representative of the field or the practice? So that's definitely number one. Another thing, too, is that with some of these versions, take our human resource version, for example. So again, that was the director from Boeing that created this. We aligned those standards, the skills and competencies assessed, directly with SHRM's standards. That's actually something we're doing with that public health version as well. So relating it to like a larger organizational body's, core standards that are going to be prevalent across the country, that's a perfect way we go about validating it. I could give you another example. We're in talks right now with one of the largest healthcare accreditation bodies in the country, and they want to create a version based on ISO 9001 standards. So kind of helps us kind of keep on track right there, if you see what I mean. So.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. But just in closing, I mentioned general management quite a bit, but I did want to bring up some of our in-house versions there at the top. If there's a particular version you'd like to see outside of the general management one we went through, whether it be, I would say, my recommendations would be like people management, ethical decision-making, or time management, or GM, of course, general management. Is there any preference that you'd like to try or anything you'd like to see? I can give you access to as many of them as you like, essentially.
I'd love to see the time management one.
Time management?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And then just to be sure, whom am I speaking with? Is this Tolbert or is this Dr. Miller?
Dr. Miller.
Dr. Miller, okay. Dr. Miller, you'd like to try time management, can definitely do that. And then I could still give you the general management as well, because I figured I'd give you access to the same one. That way you've got something parallel to look at, but I can give you access to the other ones as well.
Okay.
Dr. Tolbert, is there any ones that you'd like to try, whether it be people management, ethics, or time management?
Oh, those are the 3?
Yeah, I would say those are the 3, and the reason I say that is because those are the ones that we've done that empirical study on within the technical synopsis. I just want to make sure it's apples to apples when you guys take a look at that.
Okay. Time management and people management.
People management? Okay, absolutely.
Want to see your
definitely.
escape?
Oh yeah, I could show you the escape room as well. It's actually interesting. To be frank with you both, me and a colleague actually wrote that one, so we did that from scratch. Yeah,
wow.
I could give you a little context on that one. We created that as a ice-breaking activity for a return on interview event at DePaul University. So we work with them quite a bit, but what we did was there were graduates leaving the program, and they wanted this kind of last hurrah essentially, and we actually put about 40 students through it within about 2 hours actually. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I could give the escape room access. Yeah. So why don't I do this just to keep things consistent? How about I give you both of you access? I'll give you the GM, time, people, and escape room for all of you, and then you can just kind of choose which ones you'd like and go from there. How does that sound?
Okay, that's great.
Okay. Excellent. Any other questions I can answer for before we wrap up here?
No, great presentation. Very comprehensive.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And hey, we're always talking with instructional designers such as yourselves to how we can really make this tool better and everything. So if this is something you're interested outside the CODiEs or anything, after the nomination process and everything, feel free to let me know. I'd be happy to let you in on the ground floor or even give you access to the platform to get your feedback on it. Happy to hear any insight you can give us. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All righty. Well, thank you both again for your time. I really do appreciate it. I should be able to provide all of the additional resources and the access to the versions by the end of the day today. It just may take a little bit of time with a 1-hour call. It's just waiting on the recording to process. But if you do have any additional questions, you can feel free to shoot them to me via email, and I'll include my phone information in there as well. All right?
Okay. That's terrific. Thank you.
Thank you both for your time. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.